Welcome to the Love Lessons podcast, where we talk about love and relationships, where we talk about what we've learned and how we've grown. Thank you for joining me. If you don't know me, I'm Detra D. Hester, a certified life coach, wife, mother, teacher, author, and mentor. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for listening to another Love Lessons podcast. The topic today is, are your expectations unrealistic? I believe that this topic is applicable to single people first, but then also married people who are a little discouraged about their choice in a mate. And the reason why I say married people as well, because a lot of people may have been in the situation that I was in my previous marriage. And that was one that I met him as a teenager. I evolved as a woman, and I basically got to the point to where my standards had changed as far as who I was in relationship with. So as a teenager, it's kind of hard to set standards for yourself because you don't know who you are. You don't know who you are becoming. So that being said, sometimes you find yourself pigeonholed into a relationship just based on your experience with that person. And in my case, I got pregnant at such a young age, and because of my religious background, I was trying to fix the quote-unquote mistake and get married to the person so that we can create a family, like a two-parent household, which is what I did not have. So that being said, I chose to get with the person that I got pregnant by based on standards that were not fully developed. I was not a star, and what I mean by that is that I didn't know who I was. I was not shining bright. I was not glowing. I had not leveled up. And if you want to hear more about what it means to be a star, then listen to one of my previous episodes where I talk about and I break that down. A star is an acronym. So I break that down, what that means. But for the sake of this podcast, I'm not going to go into it. I'm just going to talk about if your standards are unrealistic. Now, most of us say that we're looking for a good man or we're looking for a good woman. I know I used to hear that all the time when I was out on the dating scene. And that meant different things to different people, but most of us meant what I'm about to break down to you right now. So I have another acronym for you. I'm having so much fun with these acronyms, but this particular acronym is, I'm looking for a good-looking woman or male, and they are open for love because we don't want anybody with baggage. They're optimistic about life, and they're devoted to God. So I am a believer, so hopefully you are too. If not, you can still listen, but you want somebody that has a good character. So that's what I mean by devoted to God. So most people don't want somebody they're not attracted to. Most people don't want somebody that basically are closed off emotionally. Most people don't want somebody that's in a crappy mood all the time. So that being said, that this acronym works generally speaking. Now, all the specifics we can really get into at a later time. And I've done that in either it's on YouTube or it might be even on this particular platform where I talked about all these different expectations and the checklists and all of that. And that was really fun to do. But when I wanted to just nail it down to something simple, this is what I came up with. This is what I believe I am. This is what I believe my husband is. And this is what I believe that anybody that's in a healthy relationship, they have these things covered. They have someone they think that is good looking. And I would not say this is all the time. Some people, I'm not sure why they do it, but they get with people that they do not find attractive. But in most cases, most people are looking for somebody that is good looking, that was open for love, their heart was open, and they're upbeat, optimistic, and they're devoted to God if you are a believer. that's what you're going to be, generally speaking, looking for. But you can give a few tests to see if the other things that you're looking for are a bit unrealistic. So in my previous episode, I talked about the women that are looking for the 666. So the women that are looking for the six-figure earner, the six-pack, and the man that's 6 foot. So women that's looking for those kind of things, some people would say they're being superficial, but we can go into 3 things that you can do to test if your expectations or your standards are unrealistic. So one thing, does it pass the wisdom test? So if you go to either, I'm a teacher, so maybe it's a teacher that you've gotten really close to, or if you go to one of your mentors, if you go to a parent, if you go to a really close friend that will tell you the truth, if you go to a spiritual advisor, if you go to a life coach, if you go to a counselor, and you break down what your standards are in the specifics of your expectations, and they tell you, they co-sign it for you, at least most of those people that are in your life in those positions, if they co-sign it for you, then it passed the test of wisdom. Now, if you don't even want to go to these type of people because you believe that you don't need a co-signer, then that tells you something right there. That tells you that you don't believe that they would co-sign. So therefore, you talk yourself out of it, because it's always wise to go to people in your life, to have a team of advisors in your life, not just anybody, not just people that's trying to get what you're trying to get and don't know how to do it, but people that either they've been there, done that, they've lived longer than you, they have more experience than you, they have more education than you, they've studied, they've shown themselves approved by the lifestyle that they live. People like that. So if you can talk to people like that and they say, you know what, there's nothing wrong with wanting a 6-figure earner, or there's nothing wrong with wanting a person to be a certain height, or there's nothing wrong with wanting them to look a certain way. If they tell you that that's okay, then you're good to go. But I'm going to tell you briefly that it's not. If you want to know why I believe that, then we can say that for another podcast. Let's stay on topic. So another test that you can do is an ego test. So the ego test is, why do you want the things that you want? Okay. So when you ask yourself, for example, we'll just stick with the 666. So if you ask yourself, why does this man have to make 6 figures? Why is it he absolutely has to make 6 figures? Or if you ask yourself, why does he have to be a certain complexion? Why does he have to be a certain, we'll even say religion? Just kind of throw out some different ideas for you to get your mind thinking, why? Why does he have to be that? If you cannot answer that with something that is connected to your own values, the things that you actually live your life by, then you're probably stuck in ego. So if you feel like he has to make a certain amount of money just because you want to be admired by your friends, then that's your ego. If you believe that he has to be a certain height because you believe that you can't love someone that is an inch shorter than you, then that may be an ego thing, especially if you're like a tall woman, or if he's not necessarily shorter than you. We won't say that, but say if he's not as tall as you would have liked, that right there is also an ego thing, where you don't have really a a solid foundation for why you feel the way you feel. If you know that you will just completely not be attracted to him and that would be unfair to him, that's one thing. But if you just want him to be a certain height just because, just to check off something on your checklist, that's an ego thing. So hopefully I've given you enough examples for you to check your ego and see if your ego is the issue. Then you also have to pass the faith test when it comes to your checklist and things that you actually expect in a guy. So when I say the faith test, is what kind of man do you actually believe that God would provide for you? And I'll tell you guys in a story time what my experience was when it comes to the faith test. That is tough because sometimes you have to stand the test of time in order to pass that test. So once you feel like you are, you've got some realistic expectations. So you've got some basics going. They're good looking, they're open for love, they're optimistic about life, they're devoted to God, because that covers a lot. If you're devoted to God, that covers a lot in regards to your character as well. So now that you've gotten just the basics of what you should be looking for, and now that you know what the tests are, let's get into the story time, because I've got to tell you that this is not easy. Going through the test to test if your expectations are realistic, oh my goodness, it can be tough. But stay with me because we're going to do a story time. We're going to talk about what God told me about my husband a little bit, because I don't even think I can get it all in. And then also we're going to talk about the test of faith. Stay with me. I wanted to take a moment to tell you how excited I am to have a podcast. I finally have a podcast, and that was because of Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. For one, it's free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. So it's really easy. And on top of that, it will get your podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so many more. Many that I hadn't even heard of before Anchor. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So you don't have to build up this huge audience first. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one spot. So what I need you to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started with your own podcast, because you have a purpose and you have a voice that someone's waiting to hear. It's time for story time. You are still here and I am so glad about it. So let's get into it. So what I was going to tell you is what God told me, or when God told me about my husband. So I had these expectations, and I wish I had the list. I'll have to bring out the list for you guys, because it was not according to my acronym that I just gave you about them just being good looking, them just being optimistic and open, and them just being devoted to God. Absolutely not. I was looking for more than that, like some specific things, and a lot of them were associated with character. I don't think I was too unrealistic. I really don't, but I definitely believe that my expectations were high, and they should have been, because of the standards that I held myself to. But in regards to my husband, I got married. I just recently got married this year, and I was divorced around 10 years ago. And right after I got divorced, my ex-husband was already moved in with his now current wife. So I was so hurt, because I just felt like, why can't I just move on? Why do I have to be alone during this time? Why can't I just be like him and just move on with my life? And I prayed about it, and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And then God finally started sharing information with me. So he told me about my current husband way back then. So he told me that my husband would be a minister. And I wasn't sure if I was hearing right, but that's what I heard. He also told me that it would be a while before I met him. And I was hoping that that was not the case. But that brought me to that faith test that I was referring to, that really, given the fact that I had already heard this from God, it would have been wise for me to look for that when I was in the process of being interested in other people, or if they were interested in me. If they were not who God had told me they were, then I shouldn't have even considered them. So, for example, I also knew that he most likely would want a child. So I didn't know if he didn't have any children or anything like that, but I kind of had an inclination that my future husband, would want a child, because I've already had 3 at the time with my ex-husband. And I just had this knowing that the person that I would end up with would want a child. So that being said, what I did was I did the exact opposite, and I just dated and I just had fun, and I got frustrated, and it was difficult, and it took me a while to get to the point to where I was really serious. And when I figured out that I was really serious and that I wanted something real, I was discouraged at that point. So I did use wisdom. I would run any guy that I dated by my spiritual advisor. I would run them by my mentor. I would run them by my parents, my friends, and that saved me from a lot of unnecessary drama. I did still have my share of drama, but it saved me from really getting myself entangled. So I just was involved, but not entangled. And it also got me out of my ego in some cases, but I did fall in the ego trap because I got to the point to where I realized that I was a star and that I could attract who I wanted into my life. And when I got to that point, that is when I was looking for a 6-figure earner. I wasn't necessarily looking for someone that had to be 6 foot, but that was definitely my preference. And my preference was definitely a 6-pack. So that being said, I definitely understand those of you that have those standards of, their education has to be at a certain level. They have to look a certain way. They have to act a certain way. All of those different things. I do get it. But I really had to relax some of those standards, and I had to focus on what God had for me, like my purpose in connecting with someone. Was I connecting with that person just to be with somebody, or was I connecting with this person because this was my divine destiny? So I went for the 6-figure earner, and what I learned in that particular, there was a few different people that they were definitely talking about. They were on the path of marriage. And what I found is they did not treat me how I wanted to be treated. So they did not give me the attention that I felt like that I wanted, and they did not give me the love that I needed. They also they weren't focused on God. Yeah, they said they believed in God, but that was not their focus. So they really couldn't lead me in that area. So there was just some things that just were missing. And I really didn't like how I felt with the 6-figure earners, even though we weren't even to the point to where we were seriously courting. But even in that preliminary phase where you're trying to decide whether this is somebody that you want to get into a courtship with, I just really figured out that my standards were not appropriate. So I would not say that they were unrealistic, but they just were not appropriate. They just did not make sense. So it wasn't something that I should have really had as an expectation. The amount of money. It should have been other things that other things such as the way that I feel with the person, if the person is responsible, if the person really takes the time to get to know me and really takes the time to care about who I am as a person. Like that starts everything. And if I irritate them, because sometimes as a woman, you just being yourself, and I think it can happen the other way, but you just being you're having your natural personality, that can end up being irritating to a guy, and that means you're not the one. So if you say, like, for example, for me, I asked a lot of questions. If you ask a lot of questions like me and they find you annoying, or say if you're touchy-feely and they are like, no, I don't like to do that, and you get on their nerves by just being who you are, I wish I had more examples for you. But something will pop in your head. You'll know what I mean by, if you just having your natural personality, say you're really goofy and they don't get your jokes, like they just don't get you. That's the kind of stuff that matters a little more than how much money they make. Now, as long as that they can support the lifestyle that you want to live and that they want to live, that's enough money. Now, when it comes to the specifics of that, it's going to vary from person to person, but generally speaking, as long as they can support what you would consider an average lifestyle for yourself, then that's enough money. So if you're going above and beyond that, it's really not necessary, and you are really living in your ego. And I'm going to tell you this little story here before we close out story time. So there was a guy I was really, really interested in, because I felt like, we were interested in the same community work, and he was actually a VP or something to the effect of, I think it was like a VP of a nonprofit organization that I really believed in. And I felt like he could teach me a lot. He had a good character. I was somewhat attracted to him, but that was a stretch. But I was somewhat attracted to him because I was trying to be quote unquote realistic. And it turns out that we were basically interested in each other, but then where everything turned is that when I did finally get to spend time with him, because he was just so busy, because he was into politics, he did have one child that he had to take care of, and then he was also had an executive level position, so he was really busy. And when I did visit him, it turns out he didn't really have a lot of time for me during that particular time that I went to visit. And he explained it away by basically saying that, I just wanted you to know that I was really serious about you. So I squeezed in this time, but I really had a business that I had to take care of. This was definitely not a leisurely trip. This was a business trip. So I'm sorry that I'm not able to, give you the attention that you deserve. But I learned from that situation that I was just not okay with that. So even the fact that he was somebody that would be responsible, take care of the bills, I wouldn't necessarily feel like he was out there cheating on me all the time or anything to that nature. I just didn't see us being a good fit, because not only was it that sometimes we just didn't see eye to eye and we weren't able to quickly resolve our conflict, but he was not able to figure out how to show me the attention that I needed, even in a short period of time. So that was like, okay, it's not just about them being a six-figure earner. It's also about how they make you feel. And if you're compromising something, for example, in that situation, for me, it was looks, because I wasn't like fully attracted to him. So it was like I was already compromising on that foot. And then I'm also compromising when it comes to the attention. And I really didn't even take the time to really understand where he was at spiritually. So I'm compromising on all these different areas. And I found out that at the end of the day, it was because I was being shallow. So that being said, I wouldn't have given him much time if I was basing my standards on him being my partner in purpose and him being the person that I believe that God had for me, because he definitely didn't want kids. He definitely was not a minister or quote unquote a man of God. He was just a good guy. So I tried to lower my expectations, lower my standards, and that did not work. So if you keep listening, I'm going to share with you what the lesson in all of this is. Thanks for listening. Stay with me now. You have made it to the love lesson, and I'm not going to make you wait. The love lesson is God is the one who gives you the standards. So one of my biggest mistakes is that I created these long lists of things that I was looking for in a mate, and I did not go to God first. I just came up with my preferences. And there's nothing wrong with developing your preferences, because turns out I did get my preferences. The person that God had for me did meet my preferences, but it definitely should not have been my focus. If I could do it again, then my focus would be going to God with what it is that he would have for me, because I would give people the time of day that didn't deserve it. I would give people the time of day that didn't even value me. I would give them the time of day because I thought they checked off some things on my checklist in regards to maybe employment, in regards to how they looked, things like that, and they really didn't meet God's standards. So ultimately, I was willing to compromise because, again, I didn't know that I was a star. I really didn't know who I was, because if I had known who I was, then I would not have made those particular decisions. So what I ended up doing at the end of the day is I got so tired of just playing around, because dating became like a game to me, where I would say, and it was a dangerous game. That reminds me of another podcast, the dangerous game of dating. But I got to the point where I was like, well, I'll just have fun with it. So there was one particular person that dating him was an absolute nightmare, the worst experience. And I dated him for all of a couple of months, but it was so traumatic where even years later, I still reflect upon that, and I have to continuously forgive myself for the mistakes that I made. But at the beginning of that, I made the mistake because I was playing around. Don't play with fire, because you just might get burnt. So I'm not going to go into the full story time of that particular situation, but I will tell you this. When I saw him, that he was interested in me, well, not even before that. Before I even saw that he was interested in me, I said, you know what? I might just date a singer. Maybe I should date a singer. And I thought that was the funniest thing. And I just laughed. And I mean, to the point where I put my head back and laughed, threw my hand up and I laughed. And then not even 24 hours later, not even 2 hours later, I had a singer approach me that wanted to seriously date me. I didn't know at the time, the first approach, it was that he was interested in seriously dating me, but he was actually interested in seriously dating me, a long-term type of situation. So with that being said, he might have been good looking. He may have seemed to be open for love. he might have seemed to be optimistic about life, but he was not devoted to God. And it was actually a turnoff. The fact that I actually wanted to go to church and I actually wanted to develop spiritually. He just felt like it was not something that you should not necessarily need to have to go to church every Sunday. And some people may agree with this, but for me, the Bible says to fail not to assemble yourself together. So if you're not really going to church and you don't really have a network of believers that you're connected to, then you're really not on the right path when it comes to your spiritual walk. So I would not say that because that's a slippery slope. So let me qualify that. I would say that was not the lifestyle that I wanted to live, was to be in a bar every week instead of being in the church every week. In regards to now, we're living in a pandemic, so we can't even assemble ourselves together the way that we were back then. So it really doesn't apply in the same way, but hopefully you understand what I mean by that, is that if you are someone who's opposed to getting together with other believers, and I'm one that's very important to me, then you are not a person that has devoted your life to God. You're just a person that believes in God, and that's not necessarily a person that would be the best fit for someone that is a woman of faith. So that right there should have been the end of it. It was not. So that being said, I was going by the standards that I had set for myself, and not even all of those, just a few of those standards that I had set for myself, because I thought it was a game. And if I had just stuck with the standards that God had already given me, where he had already told me that because of where I was in my spiritual walk, that the man that I would end up connected to would be a minister. He'd already told me that. He had already told me that he would want another child. Like, there were just certain things that he'd already told me that this particular guy did not fit. So what I would say is, if you are not, instead of going into a whole nother story time, if you are not pursuing God, pursuing your relationship with God, there's no way that you're going to have the standards that God would have for you. There's no way that you would have an understanding of the specific things that God is telling you to look for, and not just the vague things that every believer should look for, which I talked about earlier. Just somebody that is a good man, somebody that's good looking, that open for love, optimistic about life, and devoted to God. Like, it's more than that for each individual, but they definitely need to have that as a foundation. And there's so many other things that we can talk about, and we can discuss around that depending on your specific situation. But God is the one that's going to give you those standards. So what I want to leave you with is tap into God, tap into your spiritual relationship, because God's the only one that can help you protect your heart. God's the only one that can speak to you about your specific situation. God is the only one that can lead and guide you better than anyone else can, even better than yourself. Because I talked about, even in my own experience, the things that I thought that I needed was not the things that I needed. The things that I thought were a preference, I got to keep my preferences, but they were not the things that I absolutely needed. And when God is involved, he will give you the desires of your heart, and he will give you the things that you actually need and you don't even know that you need. So all of that being said, I hope you got something out of this particular podcast. I would love to hear from you. Even if you agree or disagree, you can email me at moreinYouCoaching@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreinYouCoach. And Also, make sure that you download the free ebook on my website, moreanyoucoaching.com. Thanks for listening. And if you have any ideas for future podcasts, definitely hit me up with those too. Thank you for tuning in to another love lesson. I am so happy and so grateful that you have taken the time out of your day to listen to the entire podcast. So I wanted to take some time and just tell you some projects that I'm working on, because I definitely think that if you're interested in this content, you could benefit from the projects that I'm working on. So for one, the Love Lessons series, actually, it came from me just wanting to share my experiences in the dating world as being single, and then it just grew into so much more. And I also wanted to write a book about it. So that is one of the projects that I'm working on. The book actually has changed and evolved into so much more. So it has taken me longer to finish that project, but that is the project that I'm working on. So that's what this Love Lessons series contributes to. And I've also, if you want to see some of my other work with this series and preparing for the book, then you can go to my YouTube channel. And my YouTube channel, you can find me under Detra Hester. And if you just type that in, you can find it pretty easily. It's also in my Instagram. I believe that I put that link in my Instagram profile at More and You Coach. And another thing that you might want to check out, if you are in that process of transformation, I do have a beauty channel, ladies. So I love trying out new looks. So when I was single, I really was focused on how could I become better? So how could I upgrade myself, my look, and also how can I become more beautiful? And of course, smarter and healthier and all of that too. But I developed a beauty channel. So my beauty channel is D Destiny Beauty. So at D Destiny Beauty on Instagram. And you'll see I will talk about different makeup brands that I try. And sometimes I'll do a hairstyle, but most of the time it's a lot of different makeup. Lately, it's been a lot of makeup that I've been trying, but in the past I also share different hairstyles as well, because we can always level up our look. So that might be something that you want to check out. And then also on my Instagram and my YouTube channel, I do a transformation series as well. So I've gone back to focusing more on love lessons, but I do a transformation series. So if you want to check out my transformation series on YouTube, then that is there. And I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So if you are a woman of faith, or you enjoy beauty tips and you enjoy listening to content about relationships, then you have found your girl. So all that being said, the last but not least, if you have not downloaded your free ebook, that is at moreanyoucoaching.com. That one, it really talks about how to just get over it. So it's called There's More in You, but a lot of the material in there just kind of talks about how you can move on. So if you have been in a difficult relationship and you're ready to move on, you're ready to heal, you're ready to grow, then you definitely want to check out that free ebook. Now, after you have checked out all of my content, you know what I'm about, and you say, you know what, I like her and I think she can help me grow in my personal situation. She's been through some stuff that is similar to me, or I just resonate with her message and I think she can really help me to grow. Then you might want to try out one of my coaching programs. So one of my programs, transformation programs, that one, you at least need to give that one 90 days. If you just want some more of a one-on-one coaching, then we definitely would need to have a coaching call, breakthrough session, where we just kind of talk about what's going on with you and where you need to break through. And that session is free. So if you want to do that, and I can tell you what I can offer you. If you're a person that you just want prayer, so you don't necessarily, you're not ready for actual coaching program, but you do want to reach out to me because you do feel like my message resonates with you, I will be happy to pray with you. If you want to actually, for me to send a personalized prayer to you, I will be happy to do that. Just email me at moreanyoucoaching@gmail.com, and I will be happy to respond with a personalized prayer for you, because I know that everybody is not ready for coaching. Coaching is for people that are ready to go from one level to another level. So they're ready to heal, but they're also ready to move into action. And I do have the perfect program for people that are really ready to move into action on some plans that God has for their lives. So that being said, make sure that you reach out to me on my other social media platforms. And if you want to send me a message of how this particular love lesson resonated with you, I would love to hear from you. So like I always end every message is, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you've been through, there's still more in you. Thanks again for listening.